Welcome to the Delight in the Limelight show. Thanks for coming on live or watching the replay. I'm your host, Linda Ugolo, speaking confidence coach and author of the book, Delight in the Limelight. I and my guests are here to help you transform the experience of speaking from dread to delight. I want you to love public speaking, whether that's on stage, on camera, in the media, or the meeting room. And today we're talking about imposter syndrome. If you're a leader, an innovator, or an entrepreneur who's ever told yourself, I'm not supposed to be here. I only got lucky, but that leader has the real talent. I don't deserve this award. It should go to someone else. Or one of these days, everyone's going to figure out that I'm in over my head. Well, then you are well acquainted with the imposter. And joining me today is Kris Kelso. In addition to founding multiple companies and serving on the board of directors of several nonprofits, Kris is trained as a certified executive coach. He's worked with hundreds of entrepreneurs, business owners, their leadership teams, and he's the author of Overcoming the Impostor, Silence Your Inner Critic and Lead with Confidence. Welcome, Kris.
Thank you so much, Linda. I'm excited to be here. Looking forward to this conversation today.
Yes, me too. And it's not a new conversation for the show. We've had on Kim Menager. I think you know her. You've been on her podcast.
That's right.
Called the Imposter Syndrome Files, I believe.
Yes.
And it's also a piece of my work because a lot of the people who come to me wanting to overcome the fear of speaking, part of the impacting experiences are ones that made them feel like a fraud, that nothing they ever do is enough.
Yes.
So one of the things I just finished your book, by the way, and loved it. I thought it's first of all, it was, thank you for not writing such a long book.
You're very welcome. But I had you in mind when I said, I got to wrap this up.
Right. But it has what it needs and it really packs a punch. You have wonderful stories, case studies. It allows people to really see themselves in the people whose experiences you describe. And most importantly, you really create a process, a pathway, a journey for people to take in order to find a way through this, because this is what I've understood, and I'd love to hear what you say about it. But I feel that there's so much in our school system by itself, by its emphasis on never making mistakes and the pressure to perform, and that we have to learn before doing. And I know that this is something that you touch on. That in itself is enough to make everybody feel like an imposter when they get out of the school system. And then you add on to that experiences in people's home lives. And some people are lucky to have very supportive homes. Sometimes parents inadvertently create, belief systems in their kids without knowing it. And then sometimes it's a dysfunctional system, in the family. So I'm wondering, what are your thoughts about those impacting past experiences and messages that we get?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right that there's a combination of things. I often say that imposter syndrome doesn't come from just one source. There's not just one issue or incident. I've heard some people talk about that they believe all imposter syndrome comes from a childhood trauma or and I'm sorry, my experience, the research that I've read, and the personal stories that I've heard from people tell me that there's a lot of different contributing factors to self-doubt. And some of it does come from childhood experiences and some of the systems that we have around us. And even, I'll say, from well-intentioned teachers and parents and those influences who think they're doing the right thing and they're doing the best that they can. In some cases, they just don't understand fully the psychology of the structure that they're putting in place or the types of discipline and challenge that they're offering and how that will affect some people. So it's subtle and nuanced, and I don't focus on casting blame on certain people because, like I said, often they're doing the best that they can. But the more we can learn about mindsets and the influence of the way we view particularly success and failure and trial and error, like you mentioned, I think that we can do a lot better in raising kids and training up people and giving them the environment where they're free to experiment and to fail their way to success, which is what is required, in my opinion.
Yes, yes. I love that last thing. I do want to get circle back to success and failure, but before we do that, I can't help but put a plug in for a school system where we get graded well for the experimentation that we do, rather than having the right answers.
Yeah.
It just bugs me that it's so, I mean, especially being in the line of work that I am now, I feel like I am dealing with all the fallout from that trauma that people get of being put on the spot, not feeling like they know the right answer, and that this is how they build out their self-belief that they're not good enough because they don't have the right answers, or they didn't do well in school, or
and I think particularly in the age that we live today, memorization of facts and information is less and less valuable because we have so much information at our fingertips.
Yes.
What's valued and what we need to be teaching and training is creative problem solving and experimentation and feeling comfortable with trying things to see what works and learning from those mistakes or failures or experiments that we take. And so I agree that there's perhaps too much emphasis on memorization and just knowing the right answer versus the ability to figure out something where the answer isn't obvious or evident, or the answer has never been discovered before and you're figuring it out for the first time.
Yes, yes, yes. So I still holding the success failure thing. I want to, because you are someone who throughout your life was asked to figure out things that you didn't know about.
Yeah.
Can you just tell us a little bit of some of your experiences with that?
Yeah, and I didn't see this up front. I didn't recognize this as it was happening. It was really in writing this book that I did a bit of a retrospective on my own life, thinking about some of my experiences and where self-doubt came from. But I realized that a lot of my career has been based on just figuring things out. And that I used to be afraid of that. I used to feel like if I don't know what I'm doing and I'm sort of learning on the fly, I used to worry that that was a weakness, or it was a sign that I was unprepared or I wasn't ready for something. But what I've learned later in life and realized looking back is that figuring it out is what I'm good at. And as a result of being good at that, I've been offered opportunities and put in positions. I've had even, in my previous career, bosses and leaders who said, Kris, I think you're the guy to do this, even though it was something I had never done before. Well, they saw a talent in me. They saw a skill and ability to learn and figure things out and to sort of do that, experimenting your way to the answer. They saw that ability, and I thought, why in the world are you giving this to me? Why would you trust me with this? And that's where that imposter syndrome, that self-doubt can creep in when you think, I think people see more in me than is really there.
Yeah.
What I've learned now, looking back, is that they saw things in me that were there. I just didn't see them for myself.
Yeah.
I didn't recognize that talent.
Yeah. Now, for listeners, I want you to, you may think, oh, yeah, he's just being asked to do things that he's never done before, big deal. But these are big things that he was asked to do. You were asked to create a website, and you had no idea. And I loved in the book how you said you read a book 3 times to just even begin to figure out how you did that. Another time you were asked to build out all the tech connections and hardware for quite a large business. You had zero experience, but they said, we believe in you, because they saw that you were someone who was not afraid to take on things that you had never done before.
Yes. Yeah, and there have been several of those kind of experiences, and some of the most successful periods, some of the things I'm the most proud of, were things that I was doing for the very first time, and that
Yeah.
I had to overcome some self-doubt. I had to listen to the people who believed in me and trust their faith in me. And that has carried me a long way, is allowing people to put me in a position to be successful that I might not have put myself in.
Right. Right. So let's now circle back to that idea of how does failure fit into success? Because you say several times in the book, failure is not the opposite of success.
Yeah. Failure is not the opposite. It's actually an integral part of success, because we learn more from failures than we do from successes. Oftentimes, when we do something and it goes well, we say, great, awesome, that worked. Now I'm going to move on. But when something goes wrong, we analyze it and we figure out why. And we, hopefully we don't just sweep it under the rug and move on, but we do that post-mortem of what happened and what did I learn from that experience. And so there have been a lot of examples in history. One of the most famous quotes is Thomas Edison in his attempts to create the light bulb. And he, had 9,000 experiments that went wrong. And he said, I didn't fail 9,000 times. I just figured out 9,000 ways that it doesn't work.
Right.
And when I get through all the ones that don't work, I'll eventually hit on the one that does work. And so he saw failure as learning. And this has been a really a key mindset shift for me, and something that I have written about in the book, is that if you reframe failure as learning, then a couple of things happen. One, when you attempt something new, when you have an opportunity and it seems risky, it seems like the likelihood of success is not certain, well, you can say, there's only two options. There's only two possible outcomes. I'm either going to succeed or I'm going to learn. And either one of those is a net positive. And that takes away a lot of the fear of failure, because you reframe that failure as learning. But the second thing that happens when you reframe it that way is you realize that learning is what leads to success. And if failure is learning, then failure is the path to success. Yeah. And I have this exercise that I've done, I call the learning map. And it's where you list a lot of the failures, the negative experiences, the things that you've had in your life and career that didn't go the way you expect them to. And then you extrapolate the learning from those experiences. And then you connect the dots between the things you learned and the things that eventually succeeded. And you start to see how those failures contributed to your success. And so now I just believe, and I often say, that the road of success is paved with failures, that failures are the stepping stones to success. They're the pathway. And so you have to embrace that. You have to realize that and recognize and lean into failure is learning. And so I'm either going to succeed or I'm going to learn, and the learning will eventually lead to success.
Mm-hmm. So good. And I just, again, I'm going to keep coming back to this, because I just think it's really important for people to recognize this is different than school. Yeah. This is a different set of rules than what you learned in school. So now that you're out, now that you're an adult, you have to get the school out of you and adopt a new way of moving forward that really is going to serve you in being yourself and doing what you want to do and helping others. Yes.
Most school systems they have to strike a balance between the individual and the collective, the community. They have to do what works on a massive scale for large numbers of students. And so they have to, average things together and work toward the mean. And it's got to be efficient as it is effective. And so, school treats too many people the same. But as we transition out of those school years, number one, you've got to determine for yourself that education is not a period of your life. It's a lifelong endeavor.
Yes.
I believe that I'm a lifelong learner, and I want to encourage people to be lifelong learners. And so those formal school years were just the beginning. They were just a foundation of learning. Now, what's the learning house that you want to build on that foundation?
Right.
And so from there, once you're out of the formal structure of a school program, you can start to build your learning journey for you. You can customize it. You can tailor it. Now, for some people, that includes more school or formal classes or courses or lessons. For some, it includes more self learning through experimentation. For some, it's a combination of, for instance, I read a ton of books. I read a lot of nonfiction, business books, psychology books, and I love to study whatever I'm interested in. I go find resources like books and courses and podcasts and interviews like this to learn the things that I want to learn. And so I've sort of cultivated my own learning journey beyond the school years, and that's an ongoing process. And I think that all of us need to take that approach of, I'm responsible for my learning journey. It's not some school administrator or some teacher somewhere's responsibility to decide how I learn for the rest of my life.
Oh, I love that. I love that. When I got out of college, I felt so relieved that I could finally read the books that I wanted to read. And I fell under the spell of John Holt, who was originally a school reformer. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's passed away quite a while ago. But he decided that schools couldn't be reformed, and he was urging parents to do what he called unschooling. So following their interests and nurturing them to, as you say, take more ownership over their learning journey. But you can do that at any age. It's never too late.
Right. You can do that at any point.
Any point. And that, I think, flows well into your idea of being a tour guide versus an explorer. Can you speak about that?
Yeah. So over the years now, as I've studied imposter syndrome and talked to lots of people that were wrestling with it, I noticed these two distinct approaches to dealing with the inner critic and that self-doubt. And the first approach really tries to avoid that inner critic, tries to avoid any situation that challenges their confidence and that causes them to question. And I call this, I've named this personality or this approach the tour guide. And so tour guides, they put tight boundaries around their comfort zone, and they like to stay in spaces where they're the expert. So a tour guide, for example, would take the learning that they got from school and say, I'm going to stay in that space, and I'm not going to go into places that I don't know and don't have the answers. I'm just going to stick to the places that I'm confident because I've learned and I've passed the test and I've got the degree or the credentials or whatever it is. And I'm going to just stay in that safe space. And so tour guides, they tend to get stuck in a loop. They tend to make the same tour, and because they like to be the expert, and they're really uncomfortable getting into places where they don't have the answers.
They know that they know this area. They want to keep it. It's kind of like, I don't know who has this framework of the zone of competence.
Yes. Yeah. And so they avoid self-doubt by staying in that area where their confidence is high, because their confidence is based on their expertise.
And that makes them feel safe, and it makes them feel good. So
yes, but it also puts a lot of limits on their choices.
Yes.
It puts boundaries around their life.
Yes.
And so the contrast, the other approach that I've seen doesn't avoid self-doubt. It really disarms that voice of self-doubt, that inner critic. And it disarms it through what we've already talked about, which is reframing failure as learning. And so I call this personality or this approach the explorer. So you've got tour guides on one hand and you've got explorers on the other hand. And explorers are not only unafraid of new territory, they get excited by new territory. They get excited by the unknown and the possibilities of learning and exploring something new. And explorers understand that sometimes you take a path and you figure out that it's not going to get you where you want to go, and you have to turn around and you have to double back. But they see hitting a dead end and turning around not as failure, but as learning, as we've talked about. And so the explorer mindset says, I don't have to have the answers because my confidence doesn't come from knowing everything and being the expert. My confidence comes from my ability to go figure out the answers. And this is such a key difference. And it's really a mentality that I think it's important to cultivate in organizations and on teams and even among your children. We talked about raising kids and the mindsets they have, that the confidence can be drawn from not having the answers, but from the ability to go figure out the answers. So when I encounter something new that I don't know, I can just confidently say, I don't know, I don't have the answer, but I believe that I can learn it. I believe that I can figure it out. I believe that I can experiment my way to success, and that even I can bring other experts around me who can help me to get there. That's another key difference between tour guides and explorers. Tour guides like to be the expert and they don't want to ask questions. They want to be the one answering questions, but explorers will ask as many questions as they answer, and they look around for who else has experience here that we can draw from so that we can all get through this together.
Right. And it's as if we need to adopt a sense of non-judgment about not knowing the answers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like how you encourage people to say, I don't know, as much as you can.
Yes.
Find places to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
It also, there are a couple of associations I have. One is that we both have studied with Michael and Amy Port.
Yes.
Of heroic public speaking. And
yeah,
Michael talks about how to handle when you don't know the answer and the different ways that you can handle in a Q&A when you don't know the answer. And they all start with, I don't know.
Yes. And I don't know is one of those really tough phrases to get out of your mouth. But once you do, it's so freeing.
Yeah.
Because it frees you from the obligation to put on a front. Yes. And to pretend and perform as if you are the expert when you're not. And also, I don't know doesn't have to be the end of a sentence.
Yes. It's just
you can say, I don't know, but here's some ideas. I don't know, but here's a thought I have, and I'd love to hear your feedback. I don't know, but here are some people I would love to ask that question to get their perspective.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I bet we can figure it out.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of ways you can use it.
Who else here has some ideas?
Yeah, exactly. Throw it back to the audience, open up for discussion, and then we can all learn together. And that's a key mindset of the explorer is I'm here to learn as much as I am to teach and instruct. Yeah. And so we leverage all the resources we have rather than assuming that it all has to come out of my head because I'm the guy in the front of the room with the microphone.
Right. So I also wanted to share that I run a class called Comfy on Camera where we deconstruct how to make friends with a lens and watch ourselves on video without cringing. And we also expand our self-expression and on and on. But one of the prompts that I have is I call the I don't know game. Or the I don't care game. And I have a couple of different phrases and people spend, and it's a prompt that has two parts. One is that we're learning to emphasize and express and play with our words in different ways, because people think that, oh, I'm going to say this one thing. I say it in a particular way. No, we can say it in lots of different ways.
Yes.
So the other thing is that I want people to have practice in saying certain things. So one is, I don't care what anyone thinks. I don't care what anyone thinks. I don't care what anyone thinks. Or I don't know the answer to that. 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 So, I mean, we can play around. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, we can play with different kinds of voices and different kinds of emphases. And it's so much fun. And people make a video of saying one of these phrases. And of course, it also feels very empowering to get practice saying these things that we want to be able to adopt more of a facility with.
Yes, that's great. I love, and it's so interesting. It seems basic and fundamental, but we forget sometimes as adults that sometimes you just have to practice something a few times. When something's hard, you just need to do it more. Yeah. And so something like that, saying I don't know over and over, lots of different ways, it gets you comfortable with, it's not such a bad thing to say I don't know.
Yeah.
It didn't crush me. Yeah. It didn't hurt my ego. And look, the person on the other side of the camera didn't lose all the respect that they had for
in
me,
fact, what they get is positive feedback, because in these classes, every video they make, they're receiving positive reflections. So what works, what's resonating, what's interesting, what's fun, what they relate to. So in fact, it's just the opposite. They're being elevated for expressing themselves.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I just want to say, Linda, I love the work that you do, because I firmly believe that one of the most important skills to develop in almost any area and any profession is communication skills. And, so many people have a hard time getting in front of an audience. And so to be able to help them, even if they're not trying to be a keynote speaker in front of tens of thousands of people, just to be able to get in front of an audience or to speak confidently to a group, even to your own coworkers, so valuable and so powerful. So thank you for doing what you do.
Well, thank you. This was my area of growth too. So
Yeah.
just like you, and it wasn't until I was in my 50s where most people are winding down that I felt like, oh my God, I just discovered something that I can kind of share with others to help them get over the fear of speaking the way I finally was able to do it myself. And then now I get to do things like this, like talk to you.
Yeah. And isn't it so great that so many of us develop books and content and stuff around the challenges that we faced.
Yeah.
Right. We turn our struggle and the learning that comes from those failures to tie this all together. And turn that into content we can help other people with.
Yes. And that's what I want people who are listening and who do struggle with the imposter syndrome to know, that there not only is there hope to get through it, but when you do get through it, you will be equipped to help others find their way with it too. Yes. And the more we are out there helping one another to shine more brightly and be more comfortable in ourselves, we can be more effective. We can go more places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's been one of the most gratifying things that I've heard from people after publishing my book is they said, now I have learned how to recognize imposter syndrome in someone else. And I can tell them, hey, I've been through this. There's hope. Here's a book. Here's a resource. Check this out. Let me tell you what I've learned. Let me share a little bit of my story. And so that ripple effect of you can not only change your own life, you can not only change the mind game that's going on in your head, but you can then be a source of hope and comfort and encouragement for other people. That's just been so gratifying to me because it feels like the work that I put into this book and the speech and the things that I do, it extends far beyond my own reach and my own efforts.
Yes. Yes. So speaking of all that, let's talk about community, vulnerability, testing vulnerability in community. You have some great sections in your book on that.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in the power and the value of community, that we need to be connected. We were made for relationship and connection. And whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, whether you love being in large crowds of people or you prefer the individual one-on-one relationships, in either case, we are meant to be connected to one another in some way. And so community is really, really important. But what I discovered, particularly as it relates to imposter syndrome and self-doubt and struggle, is that community can really work against you if it's not the right kind of community and if it's not a healthy community. And the key to that, the key ingredient that you mentioned already is vulnerability. And so what I discovered is that I've been an entrepreneur for most of my career, and I've spent lots of time in entrepreneurial communities where there's lots of startups and people learning and growing. And I go to events and conferences, and I'm an advisor at the Nashville Entrepreneur Center. And I've, been around lots and lots of entrepreneurs. And in those circles, sometimes everybody's got their game face on.
Yeah.
Everybody's presenting the best version of themselves and their business and their ideas, and everything's awesome. It's all going so well. We're conquering the world. We've raised all this money. We've got this great team. The product is amazing. Our customers love it. It sells itself. And, you hear all of this great stuff because entrepreneurs are almost always in sales mode, and they're pitching, and they feel that they need to be. And the downside of that is that it's really easy then for you as an individual to hear all of this around you, and you may even be doing it yourself, but that in my business, there's a lot of flaws and there's a lot of cracks, and our product looks great on the surface, but behind the scenes, it's duct tape and baling wire, and we barely got it held together, and we're still working on to work out some of the kinks. And And yeah, we've had some great customers come on, but we've also lost a few and had some catastrophes and some bad things happen. And I feel like I'm figuring things out, but there's still a lot I don't know. And when you hear everybody with their game face on, everybody projecting the best version of themselves, it can be easy to feel like I'm the only one that doesn't have it all together, doesn't have it all figured out. I'm the only one that has all these cracks and flaws and struggles behind the scenes that I'm desperately trying to hide and make sure nobody ever sees. On the other hand, if you get into a community where vulnerability is the norm, where people are willing to say, hey, we're doing really well, but we also have a lot of struggles. And I've had some successes. I've also had some failures. And there's some things I know really well. And there's some things that I got to figure out because I don't have a clue. If you're in a community where that is the norm, then that's going to really help you to feel like, hey, my struggles are the same as everybody else's struggles. And I don't have to feel this self-doubt like I don't fit in and I'm the only one that I'm a fraud, because look, everybody's just figuring it out as they go, which is the reality most of the time. And so I came to realize that community without vulnerability will feed your self-doubt. It'll feed your imposter syndrome. It'll cause it to really strengthen, and that inner critic will get really loud. But community with vulnerability will starve it. Community with vulnerability will quell those doubts. It'll quiet that voice of the inner critic, because when you're surrounded by other people that are on the journey with you, and you can see them struggle while you struggle, but you also can celebrate their successes while they celebrate your successes, you realize, man, we're all in this together. We're all on the same journey.
Yeah.
And so I've come to just discover that as important as community is, vulnerability is the key that determines whether community works for you or against you.
Right. So find places where you can share your real story.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've learned now, this has become really powerful. I've learned to use vulnerability as a test. So when I join a new community, when I am introduced to a new organization or, a networking group or association of some kind, I've gotten to the place that I will lead with some vulnerability. It doesn't have to be the biggest, most challenging thing that I have going on in my life, but there will be some area of, I don't want to say weakness, but some area of lack or need or something where I'm struggling or something I'm trying to work through, a skill I want to build. I'll start with that. In my introduction, rather than just saying, here's all my credentials and all the amazing things I'll do, I'll also include with those things, and here's something I'm working on. And here's a problem I'm wrestling with that I haven't quite figured out. And so I'll lead with vulnerability and see how the people react.
That's great.
I get one of two responses. Either people start to get uncomfortable and they start to, put their defenses up and say, "Oh, well, that's not me. I don't know." And they, you can tell they're not okay with that and they want to make sure none of it spills over on them. Or more often what I get is people lean in and say, "I'm so glad you said that because I struggle with that too. And I was afraid to say, I thought I was the only one, but maybe we can," or, "That's not my challenge, but here's what I'm really struggling with. And I'll help you with that if you'll help me with this. And maybe we can, work together." And that's when I know I'm in a healthy community where vulnerability is going to be not only accepted, but celebrated and rewarded. And it's going to help me. And those other communities where vulnerability is not the norm, I just know that I can't invest very much of myself into those. I know that they're not going to be helpful to me. They're not going to build my confidence. And I'm going to be careful how much of myself I put into that, because there are other communities that are really great to be a part of. You mentioned earlier Michael and Amy Port and Heroic Public Speaking, and they built an incredible community of really supportive and encouraging people. And I would say that's an example of one where vulnerability is okay. I've talked to some amazing people there who have said, "Man, I feel like I'm the only one who doesn't belong here. Like, this is just so incredible, all these people, and I'm just figuring this thing out." But so many people are just willing to open up and talk about those struggles, and then we get to encourage one another and lift each other up and celebrate those wins. So it's been fantastic.
Yes. That's also what I love about the programs that I run, because everyone who comes is wanting to get more comfortable, overcome their fear of speaking. And so they're looking around, they're going, oh my God, I'm not the only one here. We're all working on this together.
Yeah.
And it's a safe space.
Yes.
It's a safe space. Yeah.
We need those safe spaces.
Yeah. So I love this process of when you introduce yourself to test out as an experiment in that explorer mode with like test out sharing something that is not the polished, shiny surface of ourselves in our elevator pitch, but to try out what it's like, how people respond when you share this other side of you. So I want to challenge anyone who's listening to this to take that with them in the next community event that they participate in, where they are sharing about themselves. And if it seems appropriate to think about, well, what would you share? And then do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And two things about that. One is I want to acknowledge up front that is not without risk, right? There's some risk in there, that vulnerability, but I will posit that the payoff will far outweigh the risks involved, because what you learn from that, even if you get rejected, even if you find out that it's not well received, what you learn from that is really valuable. And the second thing about doing that is, you don't have to share everything. You don't have to go overboard, and you certainly don't have to walk in and be Debbie Downer and talk, about all the struggles and all the fear. You can calibrate, but use it as a test and figure out where you can find common ground with people that you can trust. And then the vulnerability begins to open up. And I think Brene Brown was where I first heard this. I've heard it from a couple of people. Patrick Lencioni has talked about this, that vulnerability, people think that vulnerability comes after trust, but vulnerability precedes trust. And so you actually build trust by being vulnerable. And so if you're waiting to find people you can trust before you're willing to open up, you're going to have a hard time building and establishing trust with people. So by leading with some level of vulnerability, not all of it, you don't have to open the kimono completely, but just by leading with some vulnerability and being open to that, by taking some risk, you'll build trust with people faster, which then gives you more opportunity to really be open and transparent and authentic and build quality relationships that way. So remember that vulnerability doesn't follow trust. It precedes trust.
Well, powerful, thought-provoking piece of, your idea there. I really, I know you're sharing it from Brene Brown, but I've read a lot of her material, but not recently. And I appreciate that. It's opening my mind, and I hope it's opening people who are listening too. And that if you can take it upon yourself to be that person, that leader, really.
Yes.
To lead with that, then you give permission to people around you.
Yeah. And it will result in you being seen as a leader.
Yeah.
That's another one of those side effects. People think that if I'm vulnerable, I'm going to appear weak. And the answer is no. The people that appear weak are the people that are so scared that they can't be vulnerable. But people see authentic, vulnerable people as strong leaders. So it benefits you that way.
Yeah. I've really enjoyed speaking with you today, Kris. If you haven't gotten Kris's book, check it out. Overcoming the Impostor. Where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, I'm really easy to find online. If you remember that my name starts with a K, Kris, Kelso, Kelso. So you can find me at kriskelso.com. I'm Kris Kelso on most of the social media platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc. And you can specifically find the book, including a free sample chapter of the book, at overcomingtheimposter.com.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And I really encourage people to check it out. You have so many examples. You have a whole journey for people to follow. And I'm just wanting to see more people feel self-empowered and excited about the work that they do without having to struggle or suffer with this kind of self-doubt. It's time to overcome it.
Yes. Thank you so much, Linda. I've enjoyed this conversation immensely. I appreciate you having me on the show.
Me too. Thank you for being on. And for all of you who are listening, thank you so much. If you have any comments of what you really liked in this, please put them in and we will come back and respond to you. And until the next time, we're wishing you delight in the limelight.